What's up everybody, we're back in Uldir with another raid guide. And today we're taking a look at Mythrax on Mythic difficulty. So I'll be going over most of the mechanics, how to deal with them, and our overall tactic for this fight. So for this encounter you want to bring 2 tanks, 5 healers, and 13 DPS. However, this fight does not favor melee too much, so if possible bring only like 3 or 4 of them. So for the fight itself, the core mechanics are still there, but the new thing to look out for in phase 1 is the living weapon, an ad called Salsaics. I think. This ad will spawn at a random non-tank player's position and will stay there until he's been brought to 50% HP and then he goes away. The ad itself uses Obliteration Blast just like Mythrax, and on top of this it has a spell called Void Echoes. Void Echoes deals raid-wide AoE damage and it increases the damage of its next Void Echoes by 50%. It is not interruptible, so needless to say, too many Void Echoes and it's a wipe. And on top of this, in phase 2, the ad will appear once again to mess things up a bit. This time it's whenever Mythrax channels Obliteration Beam. It will channel it into the ad, and the ad will in turn channel a smaller beam in another direction. So pretty much lasers in phase 2. So how do we deal with all of this? In phase 1, you want to tank the boss in the middle of the room and have predetermined spots for each and every member in the raid that they will use during any and all phase 1s. We used this picture as our base for positioning in phase 1, so everyone knew beforehand where to stand. This will help you out a lot with the mind control spheres and just overall throughout the fight. And it is very important that you stick close to your position due to the mind control spheres. If 2 players gets mind controlled at the same time, it is very hard to recover from, so avoid that. And on that subject, we use 2 DKs, a druid and a monk to handle the mind controlled players, making sure we get them out of it as fast as possible. And even if you don't have 2 DKs, any class with a knockback can do it. It's just that DK's grips are faster and very reliable. So with these positions in mind, we handle the imminent ruin in the simplest way possible. If you get it, just do a 180 and run straight backwards before it runs out. There's no stress though, it lasts for a very long time. So here comes the tricky part, the living weapon. As I previously mentioned, it spawns on a random non-tank player's position. So what you want to do is bait it, because you want to have the ad as close to the boss as possible. This just makes it so that both ranged and melee DPS can reach it without any issues, and it allows cleaving. So to do this in the simplest way possible, just have every ranged, including healers, get inside Mythrax hitbox 1 or 2 seconds before the ad spawns. Your very first ad is after the first mind control in phase 1. After that, it's an ad every minute, and it's always after a mind control. So there's never any tricky overlaps with the ad. There's never a mind control, and even if you have imminent ruin, you will have time to run in and run out before it explodes. So just make sure the ad is always next to the boss. When the ad is up, everyone needs to switch to it and burn it down before its third cast of Void Echoes. You might need to save some DPS cooldown for these ads, but that depends on your overall raid DPS. One tip I can give you is that any dots that are up on the ad when it despawns will still do damage to it, meaning that the next time it spawns, it will have less HP. And this is the reason a lot of guilds stack Affliction Warlocks. It's not mandatory, but it does help. So any class with dots, make sure to refresh them just before the ad reaches 50% and runs away. Other than that, as I mentioned earlier, the ad also casts Obliteration Blast. It works the same way as Mythrax Beam, it's just a lot harder to see which direction it's facing, but needless to say, avoid getting hit by it. And that's pretty much it for phase 1. You should aim to only get 2 ads per phase 1. If the third one spawns just before intermission, ignore it, it will disappear when the boss goes into intermission. Just make sure to handle the mind controls, make sure to bait and kill the ad, and make sure to dodge beams. And for you tanks out there, it's pretty much like heroic on steroids. Just watch out, it hurts a lot. And whenever you're not tanking, make sure to get rid of your annihilation stacks. Moving on to phase 2, or intermission, whatever you want to call it. So phase 2 is the same as it is in heroic. The only difference is you have an extra beam to track. However, there's a pretty easy way to deal with phase 2. So we had 1 tank, 1 healer, and 2 warlock pets. Yes, pets. Move to one side of the room with one of the big adds. The reason for the warlock pets is mainly to interrupt the big add. One tank isn't enough to keep it interrupted, so we had the tank interrupt, then pet, then tank, then pet. And the rest of the raids stacked on a particular spot marked with a moon, as shown here. And as soon as the boss starts to cast his beam, we move to a new location marked with a circle, as shown here. Moving between two set locations anytime Mythrax casts Obliteration Beam ensures that you will never get hit by either of the beams. On top of this, if you always start on where we have our moon mark and move to circle after the first beam, jump up on the rocks, any and all Vision of Madness adds will spawn on top of each other, stacked instead of spread. And having them stacked just makes it a lot easier to AoE. So pretty much we move between these two locations, we nuke the big add, when it dies the tank and healer on the other side moves over and we kill that add as well. If done correctly, no one will ever take damage from the beams, the vision adds will be stacked and AoE down fast, and you should be able to kill the second big add before the intermission is over. And as soon as the intermission ends, everyone needs to get back to their original positions and phase 1 starts again. And at this point it's pretty much rinse repeat, so when phase 1 starts again you want to treat it the same way as when you jump down. It starts with a mind control and then a living weapon bait, and 1 minute later another bait. The timings are exactly the same in any and all phase 1s. And after this you'll get one more intermission, you do exactly the same thing as the first one. When that's over it's time for phase 1 yet again. So the only difference here is that you want to pop bloodlust when the first living weapon ad spawns, nuke away, and if you have enough DPS you can burn down the boss before the second ad has time to cast its third void echoes. Which means you ignore the second ad and you just tunnel the boss. If you don't have enough DPS you can just kill the second ad and then the boss. So a good rule to follow is that if the boss has less than 4.5 million health when the second ad spawns, you ignore the ad. If it has more, you kill the ad. Other than that, the only thing to really think about in the last phase 1 is that at 20% you can no longer get rid of your annihilation stacks. This is pretty much only an issue for tanks. So if you're tanks out there, there's two ways of doing it. Some guilds have their DPS taunt Mythrax before he casts Essence Shear and they pop an immunity like Netherwalk or Bubble. However, what we did was one tank takes all the Essence Shears and one tank takes the boss in between, which I found was a lot easier and less messy than having DPS run around and taunt things. Mind you that the Essence Shear tank in that phase will need externals and cooldowns for each and every Essence Shear due to annihilation stacks. Other than that, healers needs to be on their toes a lot during this fight. It is very healing intense, but it is very predictable. Raid-wide damage anytime you get someone out of a mind control, raid-wide damage anytime imminent ruin blows up, and raid-wide damage anytime the ad casts void echoes, so make sure to set up your healing cooldowns for that. If you're above 15 stacks of annihilation as a DPS or healer, you should pick up a few orbs. If not, leave the orbs for the tanks. And lastly, I gotta recommend a weak aura that pretty much everyone in our raid used. It shows whenever you're safe when the mind control orbs are about to spawn. If it's green, then there's no risk for a double mind control. If it is red, you're too close to someone. Very simple, and it helped a lot. On top of this, the very same weak aura shows when you need to bait the living weapon and whenever beams are about to go off. I will leave a link to it in the descriptions below, so go get it. And I think that's it for Mythrax on Mythic difficulty. If you have any questions at all, make sure to hit me up in the comments below. And as always, if you like these kind of videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave me a like, and ring that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on Gahun.